Hugh, I mean, have you had many people coming to you with their grievances? What kind of stories have you heard?
Sure, we've had quite a big increase over the last year, around 64% of people coming in about JSA sanctions. The types of grievances obviously vary, but we've had some really disappointing feedback from our customers around being sanctioned, for example, when they were on a training course that the job centre knew about and indeed authorised, but therefore missing a meeting, one of those 19% of people missing a meeting, and the job centre deciding that that deserved a sanction. We don't think that's right.
Does that sound right to you?
Well, these kind of individual cases obviously are not right. And undoubtedly in anything like this, there's going to be individual hard cases or cases where the administrators make a mistake. But what we should not conclude from that is that it's wrong to try and reform the system or to give people who are on job seekers allowance a stronger incentive to try and find work.
OK, I've got a few more examples for you, Steve. What do you think of this? This is from various newspapers that have been contacted by people. You get a job interview. It's the same time as your job centre appointment. So you reschedule the job centre, you attend your rearranged appointment, and then get a letter saying your benefits will be stopped because you going to a job interview isn't a good enough reason to miss an appointment. How about this one as well? You get a job that starts in 2 weeks' time. You don't look for work while you're waiting for the job to start. You're sanctioned. It's not fair.
Yes. Now, the point about those kind of individual cases is that clearly these are cases where over strict and legalist application of the rules has resulted in
hundreds
a wrong
of
thing.
these cases, thousands of these cases. They're not teething problems.
Indeed, absolutely.
They?
Well, actually, I do think they're teething problems. The thing is this. Given that things like this do happen, what you should not conclude is that, therefore, you should not reform the system or that you should simply allow people to receive job seekers allowance without any kind of requirement being placed
upon.
So,
Hugh Stickland, they're just teething problems. These things happen when you make major
clearly they're
reforms.
not teething problems. As you said, the changes came in October 2012, so we've had over a year of running this system now. We are for reform. We're for reform that helps people get back to work to stand on their own 2 feet. Too often these sanctions actually put people off applying for jobs because they're too busy actually thinking, how can I put food on the table? How am I going to pay my energy bill? And that actually takes people away from the very useful kind of job applications.
It's a good point, Steve, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of stick and no carrot here.
Well, it is. I mean, in one sense, yes, there are obviously problems like this. However, what I would reiterate is that you must reform the system as it is because it's very expensive but also ineffective. And it's been in place for a year, but what we have, unfortunately, in this country is a highly uniform, standardised and highly centralised system. And inevitably, given the number of people you've got, the number of cases involved, you're going to have mistakes being made. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't persist with the effort to reform it.
And reforms need to be made, don't they?
Reforms need to be made, and it's encouraging to hear that, you know, people need a personal touch from the job centre, and we're very much encourage that.
Right, OK. What about this from Jill Carr, who's emailed us tonight saying, I don't think the shake-up of benefits is wrong. People are fed up with scroungers, her words, not mine, on benefits when you have worked all your life and never claimed anything. It's been made too easy to live off the state. And Jill, you know, there are plenty of people who have an opinion like hers. What do you say to that?
Look, absolutely, but we find that the majority of people, especially on job seekers allowance, are absolutely desperate to find work. And the majority are obeying by the rules, and the majority are getting work relatively quickly. What this discussion is about is whether the job centre gets it right most of the time in terms of applying sanctions, where too often we see individuals coming in who have been sanctioned for a whole range of really, really meaningless reasons.
And Steve, just briefly, one person sanctioned for 13 weeks, so didn't get any money for 13 weeks, of failing to apply for 3 jobs each week. How would you survive? You weren't paid for 13
Well,
weeks.
that would be very difficult. But then, on the other hand, is it that demanding a requirement to apply for 3 jobs per week?
Would you be able to put food on your family's table if you weren't paid for 13 weeks?
With great difficulty, absolutely. But then the question is, should people have an unlimited right to assistance from the taxpayer, or should there be some expectation that they will make an effort in response?
And clearly they shouldn't, but we do need to look at these rules and how they're applied by the job
Indeed,
centres.
and what we do need to do is actually have some idea of precisely how many cases there are, what proportion of the total number of cases there are, where there are mistakes being made, and whether there's a mechanism in place to correct it, which is the important part of the whole procedure.
OK.